Testing. Here we go. This one's good. So this is for the person who is going to be asking questions, probably. If anyone remote wants to pop in and say hello, that would be great.
Oh.
And this is the presenter microphone. Now it's switched on. That actually works. Hey, Robert.
Just saying hello for the microphone test.
That works really well. Thank you. And finally, this is the wired microphone that on. Yeah, it seems to be. This one, the chair microphone, we can't hear inside the room. So presumably they can't hear it remotely either. There's a comment in the chat. As usual. Oh, yeah, that is coming through a bit, isn't it? Just nowhere near as loud. All right, so this microphone is a lot less loud. Can you hear us remotely?
Not a whole lot, but you're audible.
Okay, I think what we've been instructed to do is basically swallow the mic. So that's what we'll do. And as long as this level is okay for the folks remotely, I think we'll get started.
Yes, when you eat the microphone, it's fine.
All right, welcome to Monday afternoon, Sedate. This is our hour-long session. You should be able to see some slides that I'm presenting. Here we go. First of all, here's your eye test. This is the usual note well. I'm sure veterans here have read this, but everyone should be aware of its contents. In terms of this particular meeting, IETF 114, we have some folks here who are in person. We also have a group who's online. That's great. For the in-person participants, remember that there is a local tool for this meeting. It's called the on-site tool in the client. And if you go to Meet Echo, you'll see the icon that gets you the local client. We will monitor the mic queue. That won't be a problem for us. For remote participants, it's the usual situation. Make sure your audio and video are off. And for the people who are here in person, here's a reminder, although I look around the room and I see there's not a problem, is masks are mandatory in IETF sessions this week. So thank you to all the people who are here in person who are masked up. In terms of resources for Philadelphia, the comment in the chat is that Zulip is the current choice. That's right. There's a link at the bottom. Clients do work. The agenda is posted online and in the data tracker. It's also on the Sedate information website. In terms of Meet Echo, there's lots of material there. Don't need to really talk about that. So in terms of resources for our work, as I said, Zulip is the choice here. We will be keeping notes, but I want to encourage you to add to the notes. In fact, I'm going to rely on Bron pretty much to do most of the note taking from the chair. And then, but I would certainly welcome people who are in person or people who are working remotely to add to the notes as we go along. That would be very helpful. Our mailing list is on the screen. I won't say anything more about that. And once again, for the people who are here local, there is the long URI for the on-site tool. In terms of the agenda, it's very simple. I will open it up for agenda bashing, but I would be shocked if there was much agenda bashing here. We have a very quick presentation on our liaison. That should not take very long. The dominant item on our agenda is to get our draft going, and I will be turning it over to Karsten for that. And then we'll have a short amount of time for any other business. One of the things the chairs will ask the assembled group is whether or not we should consider an interim in order to make further progress on getting this draft done. So let me pause here and see if there is any concerns about the agenda or if we can just proceed. Okay, cool. I don't hear any comments, and there are none here in the room, so we're going to move forward. So we have a short presentation about our liaison issues. Let me bring that up. I can actually do the slides if that's okay. And here we go. Here we go. And Mike, are you with us? Let me look here.
Not seeing him.
Okay.
Ken, do you want to text him and see if he's there?
Sure. Maybe what, begging our pardon here, what we'll do is we'll put Mike's presentation at the end. And if we can't do that, then I'll try to ad lib. I know a little bit about what's going on here. I wouldn't do nearly as good a job as Mike. So let's move on to our main item on the agenda. And let me bring that up. And Karsten, I can run the slides for you. Just tell me when you want the next slide.
Can you just hand me the controls?
Yes, I can. I can actually make you a presenter here. Give me a second. You should be able to do it now.
Okay. Yeah, you could simply have handed me the controls.
Well, I hope this is okay too.
This works as well, yes. Okay. So I'll be your master of ceremonies for the next 40 minutes or so. And I will talk about where we are with one deliverable of this working group. And since 1.13, we had version 04 of the document that added the offset time zone syntax, so we can have time zone hints both with a time zone name and with a numeric time zone. This is kind of a specialty and not exactly recommended, but it's needed to be compatible with what's out there. And in -05, we added a critical flag, so we have a way to identify a hint as something that's actually not just a hint, but critical. And we added one example for how to extend the format, because if you don't provide an example, then people won't know what to do and they actually won't implement it. So we have to have at least one example. And we decided to use the calendar format as a hint based on CLDR, and I forgot what that abbreviation stands for, but it's the Unicode registry of various localizing information, and that also includes calendar formats. And finally, we had a little bike shed here. The thing needed a name, and we came up with Internet Extended Daytype Format. And yeah, you can argue whether that's a serious proposal or just the scare proposal we put up so people generate better proposals than that. But if we don't have a better proposal, then we can certainly live with that name. So looking at where we are we done? And I think the answer is yes. So if we take what we were chartered to do, we can say we have ticked off all those check marks, at least the big ones. There's a little bit of editorial chores remaining. The ABNF may need another combing through. There may be a little bit too little detail about the calendar format. And we also had a discussion on the list about suffix key, limiting suffix keys to lowercase. So these are three things that could be in a -06, and then we would be done. Except for issue number 17, and I think that's the interesting one that we need to address during this meeting. And what is issue 17? Well, it's the elephant in the room. What do we do when we have conflicts between the semantic information that is in the timestamp? Well, I think we have all agreed that that is always the information that is relevant. So the UTC referenced point in time, that's always what was the abbreviation? Hello?
You're fine.
What the format means. And then we have the time zone offset, which has a very well-defined meaning in 3339. And one interesting observation is that 3339 defines a time zone offset of -0 that doesn't seem to exist in ISO 8601, and we will see where that hits us in a minute. So this is all well understood, but then we might have a time zone hint like Europe Paris, and that may actually be in conflict with the time zone offset that is so clearly defined by 3339. And I think we now agree that this is exactly the point, identifying the conflict and allowing the recipient of this information to start resolving that conflict, for instance, by asking a user how this timestamp is actually supposed to be interpreted. So this is, well, maybe not totally uncontroversial, but at least well understood. The question really is, how do we handle the way 3339 is actually implemented out there in real world libraries, and in particular in the JavaScript libraries and the temporal project.
Your audio is breaking up badly. Do you want to just disconnect and reconnect audio and see if that helps?
I can do that. I can simply change browsers. 1 second.
All right. While we're just sitting around, does anyone have anything they want to talk about? Sit here with our heads in our things.
I think we need to hear the proposal that Carsten is going to make in a couple of minutes before we start discussing.
I was just hoping someone might get up to the microphone with a joke or, you know, interpretive dance, something.
So is my audio better now?
That's much better. Thanks, Karsten.
Okay, so I went from Safari to Chrome. Can you show some slides again? I think we lost that. Oh, I have to do that, sorry. Okay, so we were just discussing this conflict issue and the fact that the implementation of 3339 in the wild may be a little bit different from what it actually says. So if you look into 3339, it defines Z, which is time zone time offset 0, as a synonym for +0000, which makes sense. But the implementations out there often have a problem in that they are also trying to be ISO 8601 compatible. And ISO 8601 doesn't seem to provide for -0, which is essentially the absence of a time zone hint. So we have a timestamp, which is UTC referenced, but we don't actually say which time zone is actually implied with that. So they have the problem that of the 3 zero-valued offsets, they only can implement 2, Z and +0, and they decide that the one they don't get, the -0, is then given to the Z, to the Z character. So this is what WG would say willful deviation from what 3339 says, but it seems to feel quite natural to people doing this. So this is actually what implementations out there did. And in pull request 19, you actually can find a little survey that Justin Grant has done, what various implementations of 3339 time zones do. And the predominant interpretation of Z seems to be no time zone offset implied, so that what 3339 calls -0. And if you want to have time zone offset implied, you use +0, and if you don't, you use Z. So we have a difference here between what's described in 3339 and the libraries we find in the part of the world that really wants to use those extensions that we are building. So that, of course, increases the confusion, because we now not only have the conflicts, the potential conflicts between the time zone hint and the 3339 offset information, but we also have a deviating interpretation of that offset information. And that is pretty much not a situation that can be rescued. You don't get interoperability when you do that. So again, if you look into pull request 19, the discussion there provides a survey of various platform time data types, and those have this interesting problem. So what we could say is, yeah, these are all just deviating implementations, and we don't care about them. And 3339 really defines how the world should be, and the part of the world that doesn't implement this right, well, it's their problem, and so on. But there is also another possibility, and the radical proposal. We do the same thing, and we say, okay, if you have a Z or Z, this is to be interpreted as a -0 according to 3339. And if we actually want to define time zone offset, we do this with +0. So that is based on the assumption that still needs to be verified, that this actually is the consensus in the implementations. We have this nice survey from Justin, but I think we actually have to cast a slightly wider net before we say this is really what people out there are doing. Then the second question is, who is actually authorized to make this change? Because as a working group, we are certainly not. And so we probably would have to have a discussion outside the working group. And unfortunately, there's nobody we can talk to, because the 3339 is, well, not exactly ancient, but it has been around for a while. So we are not exactly in a position to talk to another working group that has all the people who made these decisions sitting there with the reasons for that fresh in their minds, and so on. And that's maybe one question. I have no idea whether that's useful in any way. Does ISO TC 154 maybe actually have an opinion to that? It's always dangerous to use liaisons this way, but maybe we can get some semi-formal information from people like that. And we certainly need more statements from the temporal people and other people who do libraries for 339 timestamps. So this is really the question. And I'm posing this question as an editor here. I personally really don't care about ISO 8601. So I personally would say, well, 339 rules, and no, we don't do any of this. But I think we also have to think about what will happen with this out there in reality. And Ujjwal is in the queue.
Yeah, Carsten, just about a tiny note about the remark about not caring about ISO 8601. That's understandable. However, you have to also understand that implementations generally do not get that choice. And you know, in order to be maximally compatible, they would have to stick to behavior that is permitted by both 3339 or you know, 3339 BIS and 8601, which means, which of course is the reason they do the whole Z behavior.
Yeah, I think the way they are being compatible to 8601 and 239 is avoiding the syntax error, while at the same time ignoring the semantics. And that's certainly one way to get things going. Justin.
First of all, thanks for including me. Just a few notes on the survey that I did. What I did is I looked for other platform libraries, and I think I looked at maybe 10 or so, and then took the subset of those that actually had a timestamp type, right, where it, you know, the equivalent to what 3339 does, or the full ISO 8601 that records an instant in time without a time zone. And then I looked for, well, how are those types serialized? And I was unable to find any examples of serialization that used the -000, and all the ones that I looked at used Z for that purpose. And so I was trying to understand sort of why that was. And my assumption is, if you're just looking at a timestamp, there is no conflict, right? Where the only reason you have a timestamp is to record an instant in time. If you don't know the time zone information, it sort of doesn't matter that much when you're serializing it, whether you use Z or +000, or for that matter, -000. It all has the same meaning unless there's a time zone involved. And so my assumption is that the designers of all of these libraries, again, this is all water under the bridge. It's already been designed in some cases, 10 plus years ago, chose to use the shorter and more compatible serialization of Z, as opposed to the -000, which would be incompatible, or the +000, which would be longer. And so again, it's hard to understand without really digging into the details of sort of how each of these libraries was designed, but that's my best guess. And the other comment I had is, I'm not sure this, I think demolish RFC 3339 is a little too bold in that from the purpose of 3339, they are equivalent. All three of these zero values, I mean, I guess, excuse me, I got that wrong. Z and plus 00 mean the same thing from the perspective of 3339, because 3339 does not assert that anything that there's any meaning of the string other than a timestamp. And so the it only really becomes different when you start to add time zones to it. And so because time zones are out of the scope of 3339, I'm not sure that we're actually breaking anything. And so I totally am open to feedback on that. But that's my sense, is that 3339 continues to exist, continues to be valid. When you add a time zone, that's actually when, which is the whole purpose of this new spec, is when you need to really draw that difference. Well.
Yeah, so I I copied the section 4.3 into the chat, and this is what gives semantics to minus 0000, and it's trying to say that an unknown offset to local time is expressed with -0, and a known offset can be expressed with both z and +0. And they say both z and +0 imply that UTC is the preferred reference point for the specified time. So we do have a pretty clear statement from 3339. Of course, you're right that this doesn't prescribe how an implementation actually is supposed to use this information, and maybe implementations actually did have some leeway in not actually making use of the information that is encoded in the timestamp. But yeah, I think we are at least changing this section 4.3 if we say Z really goes into the same group of unknown local time offset. So I have a lot of sympathy for that change. It makes a lot of sense to me. But then 3339 has been around for a while, and it's just celebrating its 20th birthday these days. So we should have some very good reason to change that.
Ujwal, go ahead.
Okay, I think Ron wanted to go first, but real quick, just a comment on what you said, Kirsten. I understand that 3339 has been around for quite a while, but the fact that this has been an inconsistency for so long is, it makes me feel exactly the opposite way about this, which is that, okay, for say last 20 years, implementations have been confused with what to do because these two standards, one of which is supposed to be a profile of the other, are inconsistent, and they have to do something which is technically not permitted by either, just to have maximum compatibility. And the longer this situation continues, it's the worse it is. And that if we quote unquote fix the world by making the standards compatible again in a simple way, that would be a great step. And moving forwards, implementations would be easier to write and would not have to rely essentially on unspecified behavior.
I'm just going to pop to this microphone because it's closer. I pretty much agree with that. And also, I would say that it is clear from the survey that's been done that we're already using Z to mean minus 0000 in pretty much everything that's shipped at the moment. In which case, either updating 3339 with just that individual thing, or at least filing an errata against it saying this standard is not being used in the way it's been written, is the right answer here. And so I think this is the right thing to do. Our area director is in the room, though his head's in his laptop. What do you think, Murray?
I'm sorry, I was dealing with something else. Can you reform the question for me?
Sure. So the basic issue here is that the Z, which says time zone is in UTC, is being used to say we don't know the exact time zone more probably than to say this must be in UTC. Do we need to update 3339 to change that, given that the text explicitly says that it means the same as plus 000? Maybe. What should we do?
And the first question is that really the consensus of the implementations? How do we determine that? Who's authorized to demolish?
So Justin did some research on this.
Yeah.
And that's how it was being used.
Right, okay. Who's authorized to demolish 3339? That, I have to look at the history, but I think that came from a working group, and it's just a profile, if I remember correctly. So this working group could do that as far as I know. Let me hear what Ujjwal has to say, and then I'll keep rambling.
The problem here really is that 3339 did something that ISO 8601 doesn't allow. And that's why it hasn't been implemented as much as we would like it to. And it's weird that this comes up 20 years later.
Yeah.
But that's what we have at the moment.
And we're looking to correct that? Go ahead, Ujjwal.
Yeah, I was going to say that I was wondering if the fact that 3339 is supposed to be a profile of 8601 and still does something which is not allowed by the base standard, is that good enough grounds for us to quote unquote demolish 3339?
I think I'm interested in backward compatibility. If we do that, does anything break? Does anything depend on the change we made that isn't in the base spec?
I do not think, based on the survey that Justin did, anything would break. As a matter of fact, it would fix this inconsistency, which would make it easier for implementers to conform to both standards by just sticking to the smaller subset, which is 3339.
And the third question on here, before I guess Justin's on there. We could ask the liaison if the liaison concurs, or if TC-154 concurs, that this would not be a breaking thing, or that they have no reason to, tell us we shouldn't do that. Go ahead, Justin.
Ron, do you want to talk?
Sorry, no, I'll take myself back out of the queue.
Yeah.
Okay. So the one thing I'd recommend is I don't think you should remove the minus 0000 from 3339. In other words, that's been around for 20 years. If anybody's using it, I didn't find anybody using it, but I'm sure there is somebody out there who has. So I would strongly recommend we not take that out, but rather I think it would make sense to acknowledge that in the 20 years since then, the industry has essentially voted with their feet around a particular implementation of Z that is also useful in what we're doing here, which is to include a time zone hint along with a timestamp, right? So it's sort of like like evolution, right? In a cave where sometimes the animals lose their eyes and sometimes they don't, but it doesn't matter because it's dark. And then the animals get out of the cave and they're like, oh, I have eyes and I don't, right? I think this is an example of that, right? Where it kind of didn't matter very much until now, and now it matters more. And so I think it would make sense to acknowledge the way the industry has kind of voted so far, but I wouldn't break backwards compatibility, nor do I actually think that this makes it incompatible as well. In other words, this, as far as I could tell, this is undefined behavior. In other words, does Z require you to assert that the local time is a particular human time zone? I'm not convinced that the spec is clear. The 3329 is even clear enough now that that's the case. It's clear that the offset means that the it's relative to UTC, but that's different from asserting that, hey, this is a real human time zone that you can pull out, for instance, the local time in there and display it to an end user as if it was the real time that was asserted. So from my perspective, it doesn't feel like we're creating a backwards incompatibility, but rather defining something that is either poorly defined or undefined in the current spec. And I'll take myself off the queue.
I'm fishing around in my head for other inputs about how to guide this decision. One of the things we say when we move from proposed standard to internet standard or the full standard, whichever the highest one is, you remove stuff that nobody's implementing. Before you can advance it to the next level, you have to do that. And so that might be a consideration here. So for the second question, who's authorized to demolish 3339? This working group is chartered properly to do that sort of work. I think that if we're really worried about this, a little bit of exposition in the document that explains, the history that we've just been talking about in the last 5 minutes would be not harmful to include. And then on the first and third bullets, I mean, if you can demonstrate either the history of the list or in more exposition in the document that says, look, we looked at all these angles, this is the right thing to do, this is the justification for the decision, I think that you make an airtight case like that, then it's going to be fine. So you can proceed with this once you've done all the homework.
Let me first look for other comments here. And if I don't get other comments, what I'm going to do is, Ujjwal, go ahead.
No, sorry, Mark, please feel free. I could conclude.
Oh, okay. Because what I'd like to do is come up with a crisp statement of what we're going to do next. I think the chairs have sort of an informal sense that there is some convergence going on here. And what I'd like to do is have a crisp description of what we've just decided to do and the guidance that we've gotten from our AD, and to make Karsten slide about the fact that we are done, to make that come true. So if someone wants to step in here and provide that crisp description, I think the chairs would appreciate that.
Perfect. Can I attempt to do that?
Please do.
Unless, okay, great. Yeah, thank you for the conversation. First of all, I'm really glad with all the points that we raised. I think there is more or less consensus within at least the group of people that we have here that this is something that is not a bad idea. At the very least, I propose that we, for at least for this draft, not sure how if we should do anything on the 3339 side, but at least for this draft, it makes sense to semantically assert the presence of Z as a sort of null value, in the sense that it implies that the exact offset was unknown, and that you should rely on the suffix, if any, for that. And yeah, editorially, there's already some guidance. I suppose there's many comments about including some examples to make it clear, and so on. We could also include notes, including the survey we did to drive the point. And yeah, with that, I feel it should be convincing enough.
So as an editor of the document, what I would do next is make a pull request that adds a section that updates 3339 by weakening the semantics of Z. Right now, Z is supposed to say this is your local time offset, and the update would say this is not what people have implemented. So please don't rely on Z actually meaning that. So that would be the update to 3339. And for this specification, we would indicate that minus 0000 is often not implemented, so it provides less interoperability than using the new semantics for Z that is defined in the update for 339. And then we have a good basis to actually complete the conflict text that I think is already quite good, but maybe could take another round of editorial updating.
I'll just put myself back in the queue, I guess, to ask a question to the room about your understanding of this, to make sure we do all understand the same thing. The time that this, well, let's just say midday today here in the East Coast US time would have been, if converted to UTC, would have been 1600. So if you saw something that said 1600 Z time zone USA or America/New York, what time would you consider that to be if it said 1600 Z America, New York? Would you consider that to be midday in America, New York, or would you consider it to be 4 p.m. in America, New York?
Go ahead, Justin.
Hold on, let me get my audio. Can you guys hear me? Okay,
You're
good.
fine.
So I think the answer, and unfortunately, my mental arithmetic is not as good as yours, but my understanding is if the Z is on there, then the string, the local time shown before the Z is not meant to imply a real human local time, but rather it's meant to defer to the time zone hint to determine what the local time actually is. So the instant always stays the same, right? The point in universal time, regardless of the time zone. But having the Z there implies that A, there can never be a conflict, right? Because you're not making an assertion about the local time nor the offset when it was gathered, and B, that you should defer to the time zone hint to determine the time. Does that match what you were?
I don't
assuming?
understand what you mean by that. If this was a date 10 years in the future and the USA decided not to do daylight savings, would that mean that it meant 11 a.m. here in New York or in Pennsylvania and Philadelphia, or would it mean that it meant midday? Like that's the whole question with all of this, is how do we disambiguate this, and is the time there the local time or not, or has it had an offset applied to it already to convert it to UTC? Because certainly the meaning of Z as output by these libraries are, I have done a conversion to what I think is UTC, and then I've slapped a Z on the end. It's not that I took the local time and slapped a Z on the end.
All right, and then here in the local queue, I have Ken.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to get up and say something similar to what Brown just said. So if I saw that string that Brown proposed, there's a clear conflict that this spec needs to have text to resolve. Because in my eye, Z still means UTC, and that's how I read 8601 and 3339. And especially in calendaring and iCalendar and in vCard for that matter, Z does mean UTC. It does not mean we didn't know, we're just going to slap it on there. So I don't know how we get around this issue, quite honestly.
Wait, I'm the next, right? Okay. Yeah, I don't think so. I think what the confusion here is the possibility of something what we have previously called within the context of this group floating times. We're not trying to do floating times here. I mean, these are still instants. Z still means UDC. It just doesn't assert the time zone, which means that for a implementation that looks at the offset and that looks at the time zone suffix and actually doesn't allow any timestamps that have their quote unquote wrong offset for whatever reason, would still work with Z, because even though the instant, like Z works for the instant, it doesn't imply that the local time was well, GMT for that instance, or plus 0000. Yeah.
I'm gonna take my
Yeah,
chair hat off for
I put a little bit of text in the chat. Maybe this is good for referencing when you speak.
So that's kind of where I was going to go. And this is kind of a question for Ken. When I think about these examples, I'm wondering whether or not it's a case of one of two things. Number one, that this document would benefit from examples and interpretive text that explains the conclusion based on the rules in the text, or if you think it's just incompatible and no interpretive text will actually provide an implementer the guidance they need. And I'm going to defer to Ken here. Thanks.
Yeah, I think we need examples with text, because in my head, when I see Z and America, New York, there's a clear conflict. But if the spec is written in such that the time zone ID overrides whatever is in front of it, then I'm fine with that. But I think it needs to be spelled out and not just left for the reader to determine on their own.
Okay. Justin, thanks for being patient. You're next.
Yeah, yes, I actually agree strongly that this I think this discussion sort of came out from some comments that I made in Karsten's latest pull request, where I saw the example using Z, and I was like, hey, that doesn't match the way we're using it in temporal, so we should chat about that. And so I totally agree that A, we should have examples in the spec, B, that there should be clear explanatory text that explains not just the meaning we're talking about here, but the details of, like, is this a should or a must or a may? And I actually have some suggested starting point text in the pull request itself, but I'd be happy to work with the editors to refine that going forward.
Okay, thanks. Ujwal.
Yeah, real quick, just to comment on the latest message by Braun. That is exactly one of the most common use cases that I think about when I think about this. I think that a lot of implementations would be dealing with instance and then separately storing in many cases a time zone in order, like, to refer to the context, and not necessarily holding them together in a single unified object. So yeah, in that case, it would be good for them to be able to take, like, the instant in the UTC zone and then just slap the time zone suffix after that. And yeah, to, at the risk of leaking some TC39 lingo here, I think we're all in violent agreement here. And I don't think anybody's proposing the other solution.
Okay, thanks. I close the queue because I want to summarize what I've heard and make sure that I get a nod from Braun that I'm just not just fantasizing here, but I think we're very close. I think we all essentially agree with Karsten's proposal with some additions. The first addition is I hear from the group that examples and interpretive texts that explain how the examples are to work is essential for the document. So that would get added as well. I heard from Murray that I think it's important to have not a long amount of text, but some contextual information that explains the deviation between 3339 and what implementers went ahead and did. There's nothing wrong with that, and I think that a future draft should just have a paragraph or two that explains that. I think that makes perfect sense. And we've had several speakers in the queue that talked about that history. So it doesn't seem to me that we're far away from having that. And then Karsten, about 5 minutes ago, noted that we do need to explicitly say what changes we're making to 3339. And I think that's true as well. That deserves highlighting in the document. And that I don't think, and again, taking my chair hat off temporarily, I don't think that amounts to demolishing RFC 3339. I think it means bringing it up to date after 20 years. And I see my AD at the chair, so let me.
I'm playfully curious why that word was chosen in the first place. It seems like we're sort of spinning around. Can we do something that drastic?
I've just been reading through this again. I don't think we're making any changes to 3339 at all. We're just saying if you see a Z, then you're not required to cross-check that the time zone matches up. We're still giving the time zone hint separately.
Yeah.
And so it's -00 is I don't know the offset, +00 or Z is I absolutely know the offset and we're in this zone. We're saying in the context of this document, if you see a Z, then it means this is definitely a time that's in UTC, but you can apply the offset that's given. And that doesn't require any changes to 3339 at all. Whether we fix that is a separate issue.
Okay. I think your summary is great. And I'm in my head, I'm playing through how is the ISG going to interpret it so if it lands on them? And that sounds like it'll check a lot of boxes. So that's a great summary.
Okay, thanks for that.
Sorry, am I audible?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Sorry,
I
real
do want to
quick.
close discussion so that we have time for Mike.
Yes, one thing that Justin mentioned that might be relevant is that this distinction is not relevant in case of 3339, so we don't have to do anything there.
Okay, I'm going to just.
Well, I cannot agree with that. I used the word demolish. Of course, that was a joke, right? But there is something that the section 4.3 says. And after 20 years of interoperability experience, we are saying, well, that's not exactly what happened. And we are updating that. I think we have to be very, very straightforward about that. And on that basis, we can then do all the other things we want to do.
So, and I really am going to close the queue here. Justin, I apologize. I think, Karsten, my understanding of the way forward here is that if we do provide that historic context for and the information that the working group had Justin's analysis of implementations, we include that in the draft. That meets both your needs and also the future needs of the IESG. So I think we're in a good place to move forward. I just want to check with my chair to see if he nods his head here.
Yeah.
Okay.
We don't need to touch 3339 at this stage. We just need to specify what we're doing with this format. I'm really clear on that.
Okay. I feel like we have a relatively crisp definition of what is going to happen next. Feel good about that. I won't put Karsten on the spot to say when we might see the next version of the draft, but he should be sort of prepared to answer that question sometime soon. Mike, are you available here to give us a short update on the liaison?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
to click a number of buttons. Yeah, I can give a quick update. Doesn't it? It should only take the few minutes we have left.
Let me see here. Let me bring up your slides here, and I'll share them. You can tell me when to move forward.
Great. If you could drive them for me, that would be helpful. So yeah, the approval took ages, actually, didn't it? And I did notice when I was looking back to see exactly when, it was actually April 1st they approved it. So that was very, very good. So I haven't really had much dealings with the actual TC154, but they have had. Yeah, you can move on to the next slide. I think they've had 5 meetings since since it was approved, but not all of them are to do with the 8601 work. They're also working on 34,000, which is vocabulary and terms. So a couple of the meetings were more related to that than the 8601 work. And by the time I got involved with this, I think a lot of the work that they intended doing has been sort of done. But they did raise a topic. I think I mentioned it in the next slide. Yeah, this turned up. This actually got inserted into the thing on the first or second meeting I attended, where apparently there's some legal requirement in Germany when you talk about contracts and deadlines. They talk about 24/0000 as being the deadline for something. That added a whole load of complications to 8601. Because in every other case, there's no end of a period. You talk about the start of the next period. Effectively, the end date is really the start of the next period, and it's non-inclusive, and that works very nicely. This is an outlier. Reading back, I have a feeling this is actually in some of the earlier 8601 specs. I don't know how it matters, because much of what we're doing in the IETF is a profile of things, and we don't need to go down this hole, but it's something probably to look for. It's the only thing I noticed as being of particular interest. Was there another slide? Oh yeah, I wanted to try and get hold of the actual document we're working on. I've been attending the meetings and going through them with people, but the documents were presented on the screen, and it hadn't occurred to me that when I tried to get an actual copy of the working document, it would be as difficult as it is. ISO does not like sharing its documents because they want you to pay for them. I'm still trying to get a working copy I can present to this group and see if I can actually present it to this group if I do get one, because they are very unwilling to share their stuff. So that's still an open issue. And I think that's where I am at the moment.
Okay. I'm going to let Ron take the mic then.
Yeah, I had one thing here that I wanted to ask Mike. The main thing that we need from a liaison as this working group is a commitment from ISO not to clash with whatever syntax we do in a way that's going to be unparsable. Do you know what the status on that is and what we can do to advance it? That was why I wanted to get hold of a copy of the actual working document to see what the effect of these changes they're making are. But they mostly seem to be fixing up errors and things in the general that have turned up in the document since it was last published. So my feeling is there won't be anything of that kind, but it's hard to be certain without a actual document to look at.
So let me insert myself in the queue here, although our time has come to an end. Mike, let me tell you that the IAB is well aware that this problem exists. This is not just for your liaison role, but for many liaison roles. And so what I'll do is reach out to the IAB's liaison coordinator to see if we can solve this problem for you. And I'll take that as a to-do.
Okay, I was going to contact. I had a contact that Ron suggested I try, which I was going to send her a message and see if I could get hold of a copy of the document. But none has been published in the ISO document repository for me to look at.
Right, right. And I think I would encourage you to go ahead and do that, but I will also work through the IAB channel and try to get something done.
It does make it a little difficult to see what's going on.
Okay. Thanks for the update, Mike. That's great.
And if you have anything you wanted me to take back to them related to today, if I can have a statement and I can pass it back, but I'm not sure that we're at that stage yet.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks again, Mike.
Thank you.
That is the end of our time. I think anything further that we do, we should pursue on the mailing list. And so thank you to all the participants, both remote and in person. And I hope you have a good rest of the week here at the IETF.
Thanks, everybody. Good work. Okay. Very slick.
What a team.
Yeah. Well, we've got. Are we there yet? Yes. I think we are there yet. We do, like, what we really want is just for ISO to say we will not use left square brackets in our format. That's what we need. So that whatever we stick at the end is never going to syntactically clash. You can reliably parse it. The rest is all fun.
Wait, are we still audible?
Yes, you are. Go ahead.
Okay, are we allowed to make small talk? No, I mean, yeah. I was overhearing you. Sorry, Brad, for that. But
Yep.
yeah, I do feel that with this we have at least semantic consensus. What I would say is we have a clear understanding of what each part of the proposal should do, and there's some editorial work left.
Yeah.
Which we could take care of without needing to collect everyone in the same room. That said, I suppose it would be nice if people started doing more reviews now.
Yeah. Yeah, real reviews sounds reasonable. Yeah, I guess we'll discuss this on the mailing list is obviously the next step, given that most of the people have walked out of the room already. And probably a few people have popped offline. We're down to what, 8, 7, something like that. But yeah, it does feel like we're basically there. We just need ISO to sign off on we can use those characters in our syntax, and we need to agree that if there's a Z there, then it doesn't need to align with the time zone. Z doesn't mean you can only use UTC. And I think we're basically done apart from that.
Nice. Yeah, on our end, we've been good citizens by not putting this in any browser yet. Like all the implementations are behind a flag. So yeah, I hope this gets done soon and we can unflag this beautiful API.
Cool. All right. So we'll move as fast as we can. And I guess we'll try and schedule an interim soonish if we think we need it.
If we think we need that to push it forward, I'm
Yeah.
happy to do that.
Yeah. Otherwise, if people are happy to do it asynchronously, then we can finish this on email pretty quick.
Yeah. I think from talking to Karsten, I think we should be able to we should be done with the editorial stuff within a couple of weeks. So maybe after that would be a good time.
Cool. I don't know if Mike's still online or not, but yeah, the one thing is if we can get ISO to say this is all right. Like that's the thing that the reason we got this liaison is to go to ISO and say, can you give us a statement that this is okay?
Right. So yeah, I guess for that we need to finish up the draft on our end, right? So that they could take a look and tell us what they think about it. But yeah, I feel vaguely positive about this. So
certainly the syntax is going to be the big issue there. Semantics too, but
Yeah.
the syntax is the bit that you have to be able to parse to tell if it's one of these things or not.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I guess once we're done with some of the bigger, at least editorial changes, we could ping Mike up and ask them to present it at the next meeting.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Thank you. Justin, did you have anything while we're chatting?
Yeah, I was I was just saying what first of all, thanks so much for your all your guys' help and Braun for your opinions. It's been great. I think now that seems like we have tentative consensus on the overall idea, I think the biggest outstanding one will be like, well, what's a must, what's a should, and what's a may for the various options, and that I have some suggested spec text in the pull request that that I can follow up with. But if you want to take a look at that and add your opinion to that, that would be helpful too.
All right, I'll have a read through.
Cool.
Cool.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Cool. All right. Have fun doing that. Sounds great. And if you're not back at 6:30, you can message me and figure out where we've gone. Yeah. Easy. Say hi to the office for me. I will. All right. Pleasure working with you.
Yeah. Ditto.
You planning to take on another working group once this one's over?
I am. I've volunteered in the security area.
Sure.
We'll see if they take me up on it.
If you need any reviews,
Okay.
I will send.
I
positive
appreciate that.
review
I'll probably
of you.
take you up on that.
I have been pretty much letting you run this one, and it's been good. Yeah. I'm very happy with your work.